I'm going to give it about 1 more minute and then I'll start admitting. We have a few people in the waiting room, so I'll start admitting everyone and then I'll do the welcome and then we'll start. Okay. Rache, if you're ready, I'm going to start admitting people.
Oh, yes, that's fine. I'm just going to still
Okay.
sit here and work. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. I'll say hi in a second. Actually, I'll go off my camera for.
Oh, Rache, can you put the slides back up?
Oh, yeah. Here, I'll stop sharing. Sorry. Oh, I don't know how to do it. Oh, there you go. Does that work?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. I'm actually going to touch nothing.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for joining tonight's Timely Topics. My name is Michaela Hartle. I'm a program assistant at CCEI. Our guest speaker today is Rache Brand, a partner of Star Strong Capital Build. Rache will be discussing how to build your business bigger. So whenever you're ready, Rache.
Okay, are we ready to go? Everyone's here?
Yeah.
Oh, so fast. Hi. Can I go like that? Is that all right? All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time today. My name is Rache Brand, and I moved to Connecticut 2 years ago. I've had the privilege over the last year to work with an organization in town called Launch Hartford, supported by Michelle Cody, who is part of your UConn CCEI network. And so that's how I got a chance and an opportunity to get to know this wonderful group. And I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit of my perspective around capital and how I believe the future of capital is going to work. So without further ado, I'm going to dive in. The title of my slide, or my concept today, is Building the Future and Leveraging Strategic Capital. So typically when you think about a startup and how they dive in, right now in the past, it's been great idea plus sweat equity plus capital, and that equals the startup. A lot of times that capital is related to venture finance. Typically it starts with an angel round, and then you would go into venture capital. You would move beyond venture capital into something like PE or some institutional. And I believe that there might be a better opportunity, and that's incorporating new kinds of capital that are on the market today. One of those being debt, and that's an area of focus that our organization has. So my future idea is to have a great idea plus sweat equity plus strategic capital, and having that lead to this amazing startup who either chooses to exit or chooses to continue having the startup forever. So this is what we see today. We have a founder who has an excellent vision. They're typically great at sales. They have a unique and really interesting product or something that they haven't seen before. Oftentimes it's solving a problem on the market, and they're a workhorse. They're willing to do pretty much anything in order to ensure that their product gets to market. That's kind of the perfect makeup or formula for a great founder. What we also see, and this is in my recent role and move over to Star Strong, this is some of the work that we've been doing to kind of understand the landscape and what we're seeing on the venture side when we start looking at companies that we're trying to help. We see that the team management is really becoming a full-time job for them, so they're stretched really thin. That they have a hard time diving into operations because it's not something that they've ever done before, and they really have trouble with compartmentalizing. And they have, they're really struggling with balancing their want versus their desire of what they think that they need to do around manufacturing. Everyone wants to get to market with that perfect thing, and incrementalizing isn't always the first place that they start. Oftentimes too, they have a really hard time figuring out what to do around product lead times and inventory. And we find that they're really maxing out their overall spend, and oftentimes they're seeing challenges while they're on the manufacturing floor, in addition to now our new supply chain issues from logistics. So at the end of the day, they've kind of lost sight of that MVP, and what they start doing is trying to figure out their next best thing. So we see this shiny object syndrome kind of taking over. and all the line extensions become top priority. They're trying to do far too much with far too little money. And marketing is kind of this endless black hole. Without a lot of strategy, they see that they need to keep spending in order to get to that next win, whatever it might be. And one of the elements we've really spent a lot of time digging into is why they don't stop, and they just keep going down one rabbit hole. And it's because either somebody has told them, oh, it'll just be one more month and then you'll start seeing the wins, or it'll be that they've tried really hard to engage and think through maybe some of the little tidbits that they've tried in the past with other campaigns, and they have worked. And now they just keep heading down this rabbit hole over and over and over again. And it's pretty interesting, but we've seen this time and time again. And so one of the elements that we know for them will solve all of this problem is capital, but that's actually not true. This is the pain point that they believe will be able to solve everything. And it's just like throwing more money at it. So I'm going to stop there for just 1 second and share a little bit about my background, which I think will help to frame up the conversation. So I started out of high school with my first startup. My parents had a graphic design business, and their clients were Kimberly-Clark and International Paper, hence the trees. I love trees. And we had worked as a family for about a decade together on this business. I was like, kind of the gopher when I was 8. And then as I kind of grew, I got to know the players, and I was definitely the voice in the room. I was like a model in all of their magazines, which was kind of fun. And as I kind of got into my college years, I decided to go to graphic design school, which seems very weird for somebody working in finance to come from an art background. But I really loved it because I had the opportunity to think. So the school I chose was Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore, which had an affiliate program with Johns Hopkins University. And my professor was Ellen Lupton and J. Abbott Mettler from Pentagram. Ellen Lupton wrote the book on design thinking. And when I came out of my 4-year undergraduate program, I understood how to think. And that's what was really exciting. My tools and my skill sets around programs or actual day-to-day tactics, I would say, were not really there. But I really knew how to think and to strategize and to try to help build companies to be something better. So I dove right in, and I built a company called Tilt, and I had that for about 12 years. I had employees all over the world. It was a really fun time. We worked in basically environmentally focused companies. I always had an interest in food, and that was the area that I always leaned into. So even as early as 2004, I was working with an organization called Compass Group. They're the 7th largest employer in the world. And I had a personal interest in food for 2 reasons. One of which was that I, years and years ago, I had worked at McDonald's because my girlfriend's mother, when I was growing up, had bought a franchise. And she said, hey girls, do you want to play? You want to play in the McDonald's for the summer? We're like, great, no problem, love it. So I was the drive-thru girl, and I was 14. It was the only place that would hire a 14-year-old, and I've always loved to work. So so my background with food was, very, very deep. And I also had a bunch of food allergies as a kid, whatever. So I kind of took this interesting, I would call it bent to what Tilt became, which was something that was a little bit off. And we started working in sustainability and food. So Compass Group, one of the areas that I got most excited about was that this is the 7th largest organization in the world. And one of the things that they have the ability to do is to create very quick change by just moving the needle with one thing. So I felt that that was a great opportunity for us to really grow. So throughout the years, I spent quite a bit of time working in organizations like that, including restaurants. And then I landed in CPG, working with a brand that most of you know today called Chobani Yogurt. They were very early at the time. They had, I think I was in year 6, which is kind of exciting to be part of it from that seat and the lens that we were working on. And because of this great background I had in food service, that was the area that they were interested in most, because it was a place for them to scale. So I started diving into the project, and we asked a ton of questions. And remember, I have this background in thinking. So we helped the organization to grow pretty substantially by asking questions to the existing customer base and finding a way to get them to the next level. The other thing that I learned while I was at Chobani was that you didn't need to take venture finance in order to really grow. Hamdi had built this company from the ground up with a $50,000 grant from KeyBank and an incredible vision. And the way he did it was so different than any other company that's out there today. And he really strategized, surrounded himself with the right players. He did take investment, but it was always strategic. So when I got out of Chobani, so we'd grown the company from 24 million to about 880 million in just under 4 years. We did that through a variety of tactics and strategies, which I'm happy to share to anyone who wants to reach out and have a chat. It's very fun. I decided to get into venture finance. So I had always worked in the Silicon Valley region, primarily because I had been very early stage with Mighty Leaf Tea. They're family friends and also people that I really admired with their ability to transform this industry around warm and hot beverage. I currently sit on their new startup today, which is called Good Pharma, and as a board member, and I've been participating in their growth from Mighty Leaf into Good Pharma for the last 10 years. So I had this incredible network out in San Francisco, and I met this great guy who really shared my vision. And so together we decided to develop our first fund. Unfortunately, the pandemic really put a damper on that, but I think of it as a really positive thing because I landed in Connecticut. One of the things I didn't love about it, which I will share shortly, is the way that venture finance works. So it really started to come back to my earlier story about Chobani and the things that I learned from working, in my opinion, with one of the best founders on planet Earth. I think Hamdi has really figured out a lot of the tips and tricks and of the trade. And so what venture finance, so I'm going to dive in a little bit around venture finance and then tell you how I landed on the debt side. So these founders, as we talked about before, use capital to solve all their problems. And they go out and they start looking for venture. So at the beginning, we see them with 100% equity, or let's say that they've given some of their partners on their team, their staff, whatever, compensation plans. Their cap tables are really messy at the very beginning. They have, let's say, majority share. But as we start seeing them give up a portion of their business because they keep trying to resolve the exact same problems over and over and over again with capital, we see them giving away their equity. The challenge with that, and I actually have a personal friend and somebody that I'm working with right now today who had given up almost everything, upwards of like 89% of his equity, because he believed, so that means that he had 11% and the investors had 89% and controlling interest. The reason he did that is because he didn't believe enough in himself. And he also really felt like he needed that capital in order to get where he needed to go. So one of the important things that everyone on this phone can do is to help to celebrate those ideas and prove that the startup really is willing to do that sweat equity and to put the energy and the time in. Whether they know how to do it or not, they have the idea, they have the opportunity, they're the ones who should be leading the show. So what we see when they go out looking for capital is they start out with all this time and energy and passion for what they're doing. And then over time, we actually see them lose that based on the amount of equity they have in the company. This isn't true for every founder, but this is true for the companies that come into StarStrong and some of the companies that I've worked with as well. So what we're trying to do is flip that. And the reason why we're starting to see this time, energy, and passion decline is not just because they lose their opportunity, but also because of the return. So now we get to the crux of why it didn't work for me. I love founders. I am like, from day one, I've always been founder adjacent and a cheerleader, whether I was having my own startup or working with others. I believe in people's vision, and I think it's really important that you are able to see your vision through, no matter what. And for the educators on the phone, I believe this is also why you're teachers. It's part of the service that you give back to the community. You're educating the next generation. So one of the challenges I had in venture finance is that you had to have a 25 times return. Now in San Francisco, it was greater than that. It was around 32 to 35% is what we were, 35 times was what we were expecting our startups to be able to commit to in a very short window of time. So let's say 3 to 5 years. And what they're looking for is an exit event or some kind of event that's going to offer them the opportunity to get their return back. So in that, once you get into venture finance, you get this like massive group of people that you now have as a new set of players. You have a board, you have staff, you have all these vendors that you're dealing with because now you've ramped up. You have investors, and then you have these partners. Everyone's really shouting at you with tons of needs. And at the end of the day, where you started from at the very beginning, where you had this excellent vision, this top-notch salesperson, this great product, and their ability to work, you start to see their energy and effort want to decline. So what we see is that the startup kind of begins, venture takes over, and then the business is growing. But actually what's happening is that the founder is really failing and they're feeling really bad about it oftentimes. It's not always the case, but again, it's something that does happen, especially if you're not hitting your milestones. And the statistics are there to prove it. So the current venture fund scenario that we see is that there's basically, let's just use 10 as the number because it's the easiest one to use. You have like 9 companies that are probably decently oriented companies with great ideas, who could make a difference, who just might need have a longer trajectory, who likely will be, businesses for generational businesses or potentially businesses who want to spend 20 or 30 years building. And then you have this one unicorn. And again, the way that the venture fund model works is that you need to close your fund, meaning all of your startups have to have an exit event in order to actually close it and get your return. So what happens is these venture funds are now taking that portion, they call them zombies, dark knights, orphans, walking dead, and then winners. So your one winner, which is the unicorn, which I think all of this is really a systemic problem. And they create these orphans. They move these out of the venture fund, they recapitalize, they restructure them, and they regenerate them. And I would say, in my experience as somebody who's worked in this industry for 20 years, I have probably seen 100 of these companies that have come into my purview, my direct space, people that I've looked at, that I've worked with, that I've supported, that are these kinds of companies that wouldn't really directly feed the needs of a venture fund. So the goal for where I sit today is how to right that ship. So a better approach. So, these statistics that 1 in 10 companies will be successful with a venture backing and a venture finance opportunity. It could be you or it could not be, who knows? It's always what's called a roulette board. You might win, you might not. And do you really want to risk that opportunity by moving too fast? So really, some of this boils down to speed and how quickly you want to grow. So I think the opportunity that we all have as folks on this phone is to really think about how that company wants to grow. And that's the question to ask. So some of the really important things to consider is what kind of returns do you want to have for your investors that you take on? What do you feel comfortable committing to? Another question is what you want to do as a founder. So I was an early stage founder in 2000, and I grew the business for 10 years before I realized that I actually wanted a family. And at that point, I was at this really crucial opportunity. I could take on investment and I could really rocket launch. At that time, I actually had this idea to do my own burger concept that was vegan and gluten-free in London. At the time, that's where I was living. And I had a whole team. Everyone was ready to rock and roll and dive in. But I didn't want to do this anymore. So I spent 2 years kind of unwinding the company, and I actually gave it to my staff, and they decided to grow it, which was very cool for me at the time. They all restructured it and came up with their own names. There were 2 spinoffs. But one of the things that made me really excited is that happened. And I was able to kind of retire from that business. I actually went into start a PhD program, and then I had a family and life changes. So it's kind of cool. And that's how I got to venture finance. So you never know where you're going to go. And it's hard to think early on in the process and say, incrementally, where do I want to go? I think it's better to say to yourself, there are 15 options on the table. Which one feels right to me right now? And think in 3-year increments, and then build your business that way. So I do have an example because I think this will be very helpful for everyone. So I have a service business that I'm working with right now. They're not break even yet. Actually, they've been in business for about since 2014. So let's say that's roughly 7 or 8 years, give or take, with where they currently are. And they're not break even yet. They've actually taken on about let's say $500,000 or $600,000 in investment, and they have like a primary investor and then a couple of others. They still have a pretty high percentage of equity, which is great. And they do have about 200,000 in annual burn, which is mostly staff because again, it's a service-oriented business. When they came to us, they were looking for us to do a bridge loan to get to an opportunity to get additional investment and also to restructure the way that they handle their technology. Because they had this belief that they could build an automation tool that was a SaaS-based service product that they could actually use as a way to expedite this service business that they have, and that's how they were going to hit break even. So in looking at it, and what we take, the approach that we take is always start with a yes and figure out how to get there. So it's been a really interesting ride to walk through this project because I actually think the founder is incredibly receptive and also willing to take a look alongside of us. But we kind of take this bird's eye view approach. So her plan today is keep the building the service side of the business. And the way to do that is actually to hire more staff. So to continue to have a greater increase to her burn, have really expensive marketing and like tons of it, like ongoing basis, and then build out this new product simultaneously. So like, again, if you kind of put these over top of each other, you're starting to see that there's a stress point, which is potentially going to create a fracture. But in addition to that, they already have a burn. So the way that I would look at it is they already have a fracture. And then they get the investment right away, and then they rocket launch. So that's the current vision. What we did after really diving into this and looking at the whole plan was to recommend something different. And I don't want to say that this is the right thing to do because I don't know. We haven't tested it. We don't know if the theory works. But part of that is growing in very slow and incrementalized steps. That doesn't mean like, 100 years longer, but let's say that it's 5 to 10 steps longer, or potentially in this case, another 3 or 4 months to get her where she needs to go. So we recommend selling the services and spending their time on marketing as their primary. And instead of seeking investment right now, actually spend all their time selling because it's just distracting to start seeking investment, and get your company to a break-even point. So let go of staff, basically streamline operations, whatever you need to do in order to grow and to get to that point. And then you start growing that side of your business. And what you have now is this really great sweet spot where you can say, hey, actually, I can use my own cash to build this new product. So I'm going to build it. I might be able to take a loan, and hey, that's awesome that I have the opportunity to take a loan for this and take a little bit of debt, because I know that I'm going to be worth so much more with my equity on the other side of this build. And then you launch. So the opportunity on her end is really smart and very strategic. And we really see this opportunity. And again, a very short window of time, she could get there and continue to go, but to retain the majority of her equity by just getting a little bit further into her roadmap. Because right now it's a high risk for an investor to invest in a company that's already losing money, who's been in business so long. So they're going to ask for more equity in order to do that. So I think it's a great opportunity. We're excited for it. So the same time that we this is where I was going with her, is that if you can redirect your time and think about how your time can be spent in order to invest in your business the right way, and then seek help for the areas that you don't feel really great on, then find like a strategic investor, as opposed to really finding an investor who's just going to invest in you and walk away. You want somebody who's potentially going to say, hey, my business is finance. And again, this is why I went to art school and I have this creative thinking behind me. So I really think creatively about how we can think through their tranches so that they're not taking additional debt and or capital until they actually need it. And then when you're in a position of power, then you figure out a way to kind of move into that next level. So I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to move really quick through this. But now I think that the organization would look a little bit different, where you're really spending your time, energy, and passion. It's even though you might be breaking up your equity and you break up, the percentage that goes to people, you're going to be building a team of people that you really believe in and people that feel great around you. And so your time, energy, and passion is going to remain at 100%. So I know that there's a lot of educators on the call. Michaela and I talked about that earlier today. So I had just one very quick slide for you on some predictions that I see and also how maybe you can support. The first is that I think that college and universities are going to become much more of a launchpad for the future of business. As we've seen with the Great Resignation, everyone believes today that they are a creator, whether that's right or wrong. There's going to be many more startups that are starting much earlier. I even see kids in high school these days through organizations in town like URise. And it's been so amazing to see their ideas. They are just like the coolest. But the one way that you can really help is by saying that your first startup is always going to be your hardest and you're going to learn the most with that startup. It's kind of like learning to play baseball and expecting that you're going to hit a home run right out of the gate. I don't remember who told me that, but I thought it was such a great and absolutely amazing storyline, because that's exactly what startups are like. It's like you're going to hit it, it's not going to go the right direction, and you're going to have to like maybe figure out how to go a different direction the next time. And it takes training and time to get there. So I think in my prediction is that there will be founders of three plus startups before a successful exit. Today, I typically see 2 or so startups before that founder has had a successful exit. Most of them have exits, but when I say successful, it's something that you could really retire on and or start another business on without having to take any support to get there. So that's something that you could really help with. And then just a little bit about us. We believe in really focusing on equity and helping founders to believe that they have partners. So we start with how we can get to a yes. And then great ideas. This is another thing that you could use in your back pocket that we really think about a lot too, is that great ideas don't always have access. And that's one of the things that we're really working towards today. We are great partners, and we really believe that there's an opportunity to maybe be both to people and to really be part of their journey. That's all I have.
Thank you so much, Rache. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to either unmute or you can put the question in the chat. And before we log off, I just want to let everyone know the next Timely Topics will be next Wednesday with Steve Lancet, Making Sales Simple at 11 a.m. So you can find the link also on our website.
And sorry, I had the wrong button up.
I have a question. First of all, I really appreciated your presentation. I also come from a design thinking background, and I'm actually, my name is Liz Hubert. I started a company called, hi everyone, called CX by Design, and we're customer experience practitioners and consultants. So we have a service business, and I wanted to join this call because I just appreciate different perspectives, as we all do, about entrepreneurship and innovation. And so in my career, I've also seen exactly what your data reflected, which is so much with who gets VC funding. It's great, and there's a big high, and then there's just a drop in morale. Yeah. And so from your point of view, and maybe you answered this and I missed it, but to me, the design thinking model that, as you were showing in your recommended new timeline, for example, is like, hey, let's get to a stable place and then innovate, and then stable and then innovate. But why do you think that's so overlooked in a lot of our entrepreneurial environments?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm actually just diving into this now, so I don't actually have the right answer because I'm going back, thinking through different projects and why these companies haven't gotten there. But if you take your life, for example, like, are you ever able to really think positively when you're in the middle of upheaval? No. And, I kind of think that's true for everything. So when you have all these things that you're actually not skilled at, and all of a sudden you have, let's say this, so you're at like a crux in your business opportunities, and all of these voices are coming in to say to you, like, you need to take finance because you need to get additional capital because you absolutely need to start hiring like a COO and a VP of finance or whatever it might be that they need, instead of really reaching out and finding those resources that could be either through the state or the city or friends or people that have already done it before. Oftentimes people feel like it's a really important thing to not learn the task, but actually hire the expert. And so as a result, you start getting these like huge staff costs and you never really learn the business. And so it's kind of like saying, oh my God, my kids are so messy, I need to hire a nanny. And then, oh my God, my kids are even messier now that the nanny's here and she's not cleaning. So I'm going to hire out the laundry. And you just keep stacking all these different expenses up. And at a certain point, you've just kind of lost the vision of your company. And now all your time is spent managing employees and dealing with all these day-to-day things that you never were really that interested in the first place, but you've kind of gotten into this position where you're powerless because all of these different expenses have just stacked up. So that's one example of many, but I think you can relate to it. So it's an easy one to say. And as I dive into this, I'm happy to share more. But I kind of feel like when you are at that moment of panic, you're like, the easiest thing for me to do is to find money because that's going to solve all my problems.
Right. It's almost like you're externalizing the solution, as opposed to internalizing and getting creative about it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Sometimes you can't see that as a founder, to be fair.
Right.
So the way we want to act a little bit is like your right arm, where we're like this person who can give you tranches of capital as you grow. But we are not actually overtaking what you're doing. Or saying to you, you know what, we're going to solve all your problems with just like a ton of money, because that's actually not going to get you to a point of break even. And that's what you need in order to grow.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, I have a quick question, and this might seem a little cynical, but
That's okay.
when should you know when to give up? Because sometimes you just have to give up, right? And pivot or completely change industries. But what are some telltale signs of when you should give up?
Oh, I don't ever like to quit. I'm like a bell dinger. I want to get to that top of the mountain and ring that bell. I think that the definition of success needs to be something that you define for yourself, to be honest. This is coming from you, Richard?
Yes, that's me.
Yeah. Okay. So if you can give me a specific example, it would be easier for me to help you, but I do feel like every business is going to have a completion date, just like, I don't know, you're going to launch your kids off to college and that's like imminent. There's going to be a shift in the company structure at some point, because either you're going to pass the company on, and that's knowing your exit strategy. So, oftentimes you get to a place with I would say early on in the process, if you're testing out your MVP and it's not working, that's really the first place where you want to start. If you see traction, however, then you just have to keep iterating until you get the traction that you really are looking for. You never really fail or stop. You just keep iterating until it becomes the thing that's going to do well in the marketplace. And that may take a long time to get there. It might not be the smoothest ride, but if you really believe in it and you see that there's a market need, I believe that you can always get there by just testing it out and trying new things. But again, that exit strategy piece that I did kind of briefly touch on in the end, I think everyone needs to know how they feel about their exit and what that looks like, because it will happen at some point in your life. Hopefully not from dying.
Great, thank you.
Great. And do we have any more last minute questions? Okay, so if that is all, this recording of the Timely Topics will also be available. If you would like a copy of it, you can email me and I can share the link with you. And then also, if anyone would like to be able to contact Rache afterwards, I can give you her email so you can network and ask any questions that you may have afterwards.
And I'm always available, guys.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michaela.
Of course. Thank you, Rache.
Have a good one.
You too.